Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. We welcome you. I'm Janice Kaminer-Resnick. I welcome you on behalf of members of our leadership team, which in addition to me includes former Congressman Mel Levine and former Los Angeles County Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky. Welcome and many thanks to today's two esteemed guests, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and former Foreign Minister of the Palestinian Authority Nasser al-Kidwa. It is our honor to have you together with our guests on America at a Crossroads. Of course, welcome to our most honored moderator, Larry Mantle. During these very trying, violent, and challenging times, we are very grateful to hear your thoughtful proposals for a better tomorrow. Our final program for 2024 is this Wednesday, December 18th, with New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Nicholas Kristof, who will be in conversation with Warren Olney, and the apt topic is Finding Hope in Stressful Times. We will then be dark for 3 weeks. We're giving you a 3-week break until January 8th, when we will host the former National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, in conversation with Pat Morrison. And after that, we will have Dennis Ross for our 21st Israel in Crisis program. Now to introduce our guests and moderator, please welcome my friend and Jews United for Democracy partner and a critical member of our leadership team of this America at a Crossroads series, former Congressmember Mel Levine. Mel?
Hi, Janice. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, our time, and this evening, Middle East time, to welcome former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and former Foreign Affairs Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Nasser al-Kidwa. These two distinguished gentlemen have been working together to offer a path to peace between the two parties. Both of these leaders have held a range of senior leadership positions and have lived with the Israel-Palestine conflict throughout their lives. I have had the pleasure of calling Ehud a friend for over 40 years. We're grateful that these two gentlemen remain so engaged in the effort to obtain peace, especially now, and also that they have agreed to share their thoughts with us. Our moderator will be the wonderful Larry Mantle, who is the host of Southern California's longest running radio talk show, Air Talk, for which Angelinos have had the privilege of listening to it for almost 40 decades. It is now carried on the NPR affiliate for Southern California, and I turn this over to you, Larry.
Thank you so much, Mel, and thank you very much, Janice and Zev, for having me back for this very important conversation in which we're going to hear a proposal for peace in the Middle East at a time, of course, when that seems so in the distant future. We're very pleased to have these gentlemen with us to share how they've come together to do this. Prime Minister Olmert, thank you very much for being with us. We'll have the Foreign Minister joining us very shortly here in conversation. But first, would you just tell us briefly how the two of you came together to launch this proposal? What brought you to this agreement?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us. It's not my first time in this program, but I'm very happy that I have this opportunity now together with my partner, Dr. Kidwa. We didn't know each other. Of course, we knew about each other. I knew about him. I think he knew about me, but we never met until a few months ago. But we were invited to a Zoom meeting that was moderated by Tom Friedman. And we talked for an hour, perhaps even more. And it was, for me, it was an experience because I negotiated, I talked, and I dealt with Palestinian leaders for a long time throughout my career, and particularly at the time that I was prime minister. But it's been a long time since I had an opportunity to talk with someone that almost instantly I felt, and I think that he felt as well, but he will be able to say it later, that we are on the same ground. that we want the same things, and we think that we share the same, more or less the same approach on how to achieve what we want. And so we started to talk on the Zoom on different occasions for a period of time, and then we drafted a program, a proposal, and then we just agreed and we signed it. So sometimes things can be simpler and easier than what they seem to be, and that's something that I suggest that we will bear in mind throughout this program, that while everyone says, peace is impossible, we are so distant from the opportunity of achieving peace between Israel and the Palestinians, I believe firmly that we are closer than what most people think we are. We just have to want it. We have to have the courage to step up and say it in the most explicit and public manner. And that's what we are trying to do now, Dr. Kidwa and myself. Everyone asks, who are you? I mean, who do you represent? We don't represent anyone. We represent ourselves. But at the same time, we are not newcomers and we are not anonymous. Everyone in the Palestinian and the Arab communities in different Arab countries know very well who Nasser Kidwa is. And in Israel, he is well known because he has been a major figure in the Palestinian community, foreign minister, ambassador to the United Nations for many years. And he is a very important figure in the Palestinian community. And I think I'm also known in the Israeli community, in the international community, particularly in the Arab countries that I dealt with also.
I think that's very fair to say.
On that basis, we just speak up.
Very good. I want to invite our viewers to ask questions of the two of you throughout the course of this hour. And as with all of the programs that we do, America at a Crossroads or Israel in Crisis, you can ask those questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And we ask you to please include your first name and the location from where you're viewing the program. It's just good to have a sense of where you are. And of course, your first name so I can reference it in asking our guests the question. Let's talk first about what the plan specifically is as we await Dr. Al-Kidwa joining us. You're calling for separate Palestinian and Israeli states, largely adhering to the 1967 boundaries of Israel. A small percentage of the West Bank that contains most of the Israeli settlements would formally become part of Israel in exchange for a comparably sized portion of Israel that would become part of a new Palestinian state. Jerusalem would be led by a multi-party entity, allowing access to people of
Not
all faiths.
Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. The west part of Jerusalem will remain the capital of the state of Israel as it was from the beginning, and all the parts of Jerusalem which were not part of the state of Israel in 1967 will be part of the Palestinian capital. And the old city of Jerusalem will be administered. It will have no exclusive political sovereignty. We believe, both of us, that if there will be one flag over the Temple Mount or the old city, there will never be peace. If it will be an Israeli flag or if it will be a Palestinian flag, there will never be peace between Israel and the Muslim world and the Palestinians. So there should be no flag. And there will be a trust of a few nations administering of which Palestine and Israel will be, of course, part, which will administer the old city of Jerusalem and open all the holy sites for all believers all the time.
Who would provide security given the symbolic nature of threats against the old city?
The trust of 5 nations or 6 nations or 7 nations will be qualified by the resolution of the United Nations Security Council, and it will be approved by the international community. Simple as that.
Okay, so you're not foreseeing that this would be Israeli officers that would be armed there because the Palestinian state wouldn't have a military, right? So you'd have to have outside forces. You couldn't have Israel or Palestine providing that.
the old city of Jerusalem will be administered by the force that will be created by the five nations or the six nations, which will be empowered by the United Nations Security Council to administer the old city.
All right. How do you accommodate the legal right of return for Palestinian refugees from what is now Israel? This I know was the sticking point with Yasser Arafat back in 2000. How do you accommodate that?
The legal right of return is not part of our agreement. It's as simple as that. And we leave the issue of the refugees to the final negotiations phase between the leaders of both countries, but it will be negotiated within the framework of the Arab League Peace Initiative. Arab League Peace Initiative is a cornerstone which both of us recognize. I recognized it in Annapolis already in the discussions between us and the Palestinians while I was Prime Minister. By the way, the agreement that we have and the proposal that we have published and signed is on this matter. We also talk about the end of the war in Gaza, but this part of the agreement about the two-state solution is based on the initiative that I made when I was Prime Minister, and it is indicated in our proposal.
This is 2008 proposal?
Yes, yes.
And in there, was there any addressing of Palestinian refugees and right to return, since that had been the sticking point 8 years prior?
Then is not part of our agreement. However, the refugee issue is mentioned as part of the agenda, which will have to be negotiated within the framework of the Arab League Peace Initiative.
All right. Well, let's talk about ending the war in Gaza as we await Dr. Kidwa joining us on the program. Obviously, release of the Israeli hostages is mandatory in the deal. What sorts of releases of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel do you see as part of this?
We don't go into the details. I mean, it will be entirely unnecessary to go into the specific numbers of Arab prisoners released, but the statement says that all the hostages will have to be returned, and a great number of Palestinian prisoners will have to be released, and of course the war has to stop, which I said, by the way, long before I started my contact with Dr. Kidwa. I said at the beginning of this year that we have reached the goals that we realistically could achieve in the conflict between us and the Palestinians in Gaza, and we had to stop it because this is the only possible way to return the hostages, and this is the supreme goal of everything that we are doing. We have to bring them back, and I think we have to also be aware that continuing the war is going to create an enormous pain unnecessarily, both to Israeli soldiers, which are losing their lives for something which is no one knows exactly what, and at the same time, innocent Palestinians that live in Gaza, which are becoming victims because of the Hezbollah, Hamas, because of the fact that Hamas is embedded inside the most densely populated parts in Gaza. But there is no purpose, no goal that we can achieve that is worth the cost, both for us and for them.
What happens then to Gaza afterwards? That you've got the Strip largely in ruins, certainly northern Gaza. What happens to the hundreds of thousands of people there who've had homes and businesses destroyed?
Of course, Gaza will have to be administered by the leadership. Here I can see that Dr. Kidwa is already on the screen, but I will say this, and I'm sure that he will be able to say everything that he has in mind, which I'm anxious to hear as well, that there will have to be a group of commissioners, Palestinian commissioners, that will have to administer Gaza with a link to the Palestinian Authority, because Palestinian Authority is the basic legal framework for the leadership of the Palestinians. Okay. And there will be also a security force that will have to make sure that there will be no more terrorist attacks against Israel from Gaza.
All right, Dr. Kidwa, we welcome you. Thank you, sir, for being with us very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And if you don't mind jumping right in midstream, what would you see for the future of Gaza if a lasting ceasefire is able to be negotiated?
Well, our joint proposal, I think, covers this point handedly. And what we propose is to have a governmental structure that is organically linked with the Palestinian Authority through, for instance, this is not in the joint proposal, but this is what we normally talk about, through the appointment by Abbas of the head of the Council of Commission, Transitional Council of Commissioners. In addition, the joint proposal also speaks of an interim or a temporary Arab security presence that obviously will have specific tasks, agreed upon tasks, and will be also supported or coordinated with a new security force that is organized and structured by the council itself. So in this way, I think we'll be able to cover all aspects of the current situation, provided that there is a will to reach a solution of the current situation in Gaza, to end the war and to achieve the release of all hostages and the agreed number of the Palestinian prisoners, plus, of course, finally the withdrawal of the Israeli army and the fact that Gaza Strip should be allowed to rebuild again, because that's not going to be an easy task. Actually, it's going to be extremely difficult task. And one of the requirements, of course, will be the high degree of freedom exercised by the people who are living there in Gaza, to be able to actually rebuild the place, because how else you can rebuild a destroyed place, completely destroyed place? I think this is the way forward. And in general, I think that what we are proposing is very reasonable, and more or less it's something that many proposals that are put on the table, cross with it in a reasonable way, which would suggest that at the end of the day, something similar, very similar to what we propose, will be put for implementation.
Dr. Kidwa, with whom would Israel or other nations involved in a lasting solution negotiate on behalf of the Palestinians? Mahmoud Abbas has held his position leading the PA for more than 2 decades, but is deeply unpopular, doesn't appear to be in any position of strength to negotiate on behalf of Palestinians. Israel would never negotiate with Hamas over some sort of jurisdictional solution to the region, and Hamas is deeply diminished at this point anyway. So with whom could a deal be struck?
First, let's agree that the current situation that you appropriately described did not come from the sky. Well, actually, this is a situation that was supported by some influential parties, including Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, who, in the case of Hamas, for instance, we all know, used to send cash money in bags carried by some Mossad agents to Gaza Strip. We all know that. And I think something similar happened with Mr. Abbas. Otherwise, how could he sustain 19 years in office without some kind of support from some strong parties? And that would include the current Israeli government. So let's be fair and say that the current situation is not the invention of the Palestinian alone. Of course, we take some responsibility, absolutely, and we should not absolve ourselves from responsibility, but there are also others who are responsible. That's my first point. My second point in relation to your question, we propose that Mr. Abbas and his crony leave, and nobody listened. And then we came up with the first compromise. We proposed a ceremonial presidency with an empowered government that would provide a better solution than the solution I tried to describe you earlier. And when this also did not succeed, did not work, we came up with the proposal in the joint document, Olmert al-Qudwa document, and that suggests something like I try to describe it to you, interim or transitional council of commissioners for Gaza that is organically linked to the Palestinian Authority, which means that this council will be very important part of the representation of the Palestinian Authority. Now, both the Council of Commissioners and the Council of Ministers will prepare for elections in 24, 36 months. And that will be the panacea. That will be the real solution that will produce very legitimate representation. Meanwhile, the council will be an important part, as I said, and probably some serious changes in the Palestinian Authority will ensue. And I think we are going to have a reasonable situation whereby it's going to be clear with whom we can talk, with whom we can negotiate. But all things related to Gaza will be the responsibility of this council, and other things as well can be discussed and negotiated through a delegation composed of people from all sides, including the council, the current structures of the Palestinian Authority and the current structure of the PLO until we find more drastic solutions of the current situation that we are all faced with.
Prime Minister Olmert, I want to go back to you about how extremists have had significant sway with both of these peoples. In Israel, of course, it's the hardline religious parties that have had a great influence with the Netanyahu administration because he needs them to continue to hold power. So there's disproportionate influence and leverage there. On the part of Palestinians, since the election of Hamas to represent Gaza, you've got extremists who have had undue influence there. How do you have some sort of a two-state solution, which is really more representative of where the majority of the residents representing those two groups live and what they think?
Well, Dr. Kidwa said before what he thinks about the leadership in the Palestinian Authority. Now it's my turn to speak about the crisis of leadership in my country. Obviously, as you well know, there is a growing unrest and opposition to this government and to the leadership of Netanyahu. The majority in parliament presently is clearly in his side. But for more than a year now, in every single poll that was run in Israel, day in, day out, every week, the numbers are very clear. Our coalition today has no more than 50 members of parliament, and the opposition has support of 70 members of parliament. This is one very important effect. Another is that more than 60% of the Israelis say that they do not trust the Israeli prime minister. More than the majority, I don't remember the exact number, so I don't want to mislead you, but obviously more than 50% say clearly, explicitly, loudly that they think that Netanyahu prioritizes his personal interest over the national interest of the state of Israel. And now the most significant part of the government today is the group of the messianic extremist fundamentalists led by Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. These are a real danger. They pose a real danger to the state of Israel. And I speak in the most loudest manner against them in the state of Israel, because I think that we have to get rid of them in the government. I think we have to start to fight against those who seriously challenges the moral foundations of what Israel was and is supposed to be. We have to stop all the terrible actions taken against Palestinians in the territories in the West Bank by these extremists. And I think that we have to change the Israeli policy in this direction. Now, how soon it will happen, I don't know, because in the middle of all of it, we also have now a problem of, as you know, of the judicial reform, which the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Justice are now trying to impose again. And this will cause enormous confrontation in Israel. I firmly believe that the opposition to the government will prevail and will win, and we will defeat them. And the new government of Israel will have no choice but, to accept that we have to stop the war immediately. We have to return the hostages. We have to release Palestinian prisoners. We have to allow the Palestinians to take over Gaza with a security force that will defend the security interest of the state of Israel. And we have to embark immediately on negotiations that will be based on the acceptance from the beginning of one solution, because there is no other solution, a two-state solution, on the basis of these principles that we have outlined in our proposal. Of course, it remains to be negotiated, and it will be negotiated, and we will reach an agreement about all the details. But this is the thrust of what we are talking about. And trust me, we will continue the campaign, both El Kidwa on his side and I am on our side, and together in the international arena, in order to create a much broader basis of support for this move, because there is no alternative.
Prime Minister, though, when you're saying how that the extremists are in the minority in Israel,
yes,
but at the same time we see public opinion polls of the Israeli public that indicates after October 7th that whatever support for a two-state solution for Palestinian statehood has largely fallen by the wayside. So these are people who are not extremists, but who don't trust a Palestinian state to do anything but to be a threat to Israel in the future. So how do you even begin that process with that lack of trust?
Had you ran a poll in Israel when Menachem Begin was elected prime minister in 1977, and you asked, what do you think about withdrawing completely from Sinai, you'd have had 80% people saying, we will never withdraw completely from Sinai. A year after Menachem Begin was elected, he agreed in Camp David to completely withdraw from all of Sinai, and it paved the way for an historic agreement between Israel and Egypt, which lasts now more than 40 years, and which is a cornerstone for the security and the defense and the well-being of the state of Israel, and the defense and the stability of the Middle East. Now, when Arik Sharon was prime minister, and I had been privileged to be his vice prime minister in 2004, had someone asked, is it possible that in a year's time, Arik Sharon will agree to dismantle all the Israeli settlements in Gaza? Everyone would say, are you crazy? Sharon built all these settlements. He will pull out from all these settlements. A year later, we were out of all these settlements. So things will change and can change, and we have the enough power and support in Israel. It's true that the immediate emotional reaction after the October events was against the Palestinian state, and one can understand it. But it will change, and we will work hard and we will fight hard, and hopefully President Trump now will stick to what he said, not to every item or every part of his deal of the century that he proposed in 2020. But he talked about two states. If he will stick to it, we'll move forward rapidly, more rapidly than most people think.
Prime Minister, before I go back to Dr. Al-Kidwa, I did want to ask you, though, about if there was an agreement reached for Israel to cede its control of the vast majority of the West Bank, as your plan calls for, isn't there something different now than the events you just referenced earlier, in that you've got a rise of religious extremism who see this as a Jewish place, and who would actually fight, go potentially into armed combat to try and keep the settlements in which they live in that would be outside of this area, that would be under Palestinian control? How would the Israeli government deal with that?
If the Israeli government, there will have to be a different Israeli government, that's for sure. And that government will determine that this is the only possible way for peace, for security, for the moral values which we believe in, for a better life for the Palestinians, for their right to exercise self-determination. We will have to make sure that we have the power within the state of Israel to enforce it. It will not be easy, it will not be simple, but this is the only alternative. And the Israelis will come to understand this. And I don't think that, what you have in mind about the opinion of most Israelis. In the Hebrew University, they are running polls, deep polls, for a long time. And their analysis is somewhat different. They think that about 1/3 of the Israeli population is absolutely in favor of a Palestinian state. 1/3 is not in favor of it, but they are ready to tolerate it or to accept it. 1/3 is against it. We'll have to change. We'll have to change, and we'll change it.
All right. Dr. Kidwa, I wanted to ask you about international opinion on this, because I think critics of both sides here assert that over these dual tragedies of the past 14 months, that these were an expected result because of the actions of both sides. So much of the world, looks at Israel critically, the continued building of West Bank settlements, the Gaza blockade before the October 7th attack, heavy-handed approaches to Palestinians. And critics of the Palestinians point to Yasser Arafat's unwillingness to support a two-state solution without a right of return, Abbas's failure to accept the Olmert offer in 2008, the election of a Hamas government that asserts anti-Israel rhetoric and even includes it in kids' education. And there are all kinds of claims we can add on both sides here. And the world looks and says, well, this isn't surprising that you've got a bloodbath that has resulted from this. So in your view, as someone who was on the international stage, who was an ambassador, representative, I should say, to the United Nations and foreign policy leader, what is the best way to rally support from the international community to get their involvement in a solution?
Good questions, but before that, allow me two things. One, to apologize to you and to those who are in attendance for arriving late, because I was coming from the airport and there was some delay in the schedule of the plane. I started talking immediately without mentioning that. My second point, I want to say that we in the regions are fed up with fundamentalists. I think we are suffering from the positions of fundamentalists on all sides. Fundamentalists on the Palestinian side, fundamentalists on the Israeli side, and fundamentalists on the American side, if I may say so. Because I hear some crazy things being said now by senators even. Frankly, they don't give a damn about the interests of the Palestinian people, and I might even add about the interests of the Israeli people. They don't. They want different things, some messianic vision, and I don't want to delve into that because you know and I know what I mean. But I think it's time for both sides to say, okay, why don't you take a deep breath and leave us in peace, and we will manage our affair. Now, to come to your questions, I think the international community is ready to support, to help, but it will depend largely on the two sides. We have to come up with something reasonable to convince the international community that this time it's doable, and this time there will be some specific result. And frankly, as Mr. Olmert said, I mean, there is no other solution. I mean, the concept of dividing the land into two states is the only viable solution. Now, there are some smart people on both sides who would think that no, we can manage different. On the Israeli side, you will have these messianic who think that it's all ours, as you said, it's all ours, and we will find a way to subjugate the Palestinian people and to force them to succumb to our ideas. This is wrong. It's not going to happen. And the proof, we have seen it. On the Palestinian side, there are also those on the Arab side, Palestinian and Arab side, there are also those who say, well, they made the two-state solution, the Israeli side made the two-state solution almost impossible by settlements and settlers and so on. And that is why they deserve now that we say we want it all. Again, that's also wrong, and it's not going to work. What is going to work is the reasonable notion that started long time ago with the international community position that we can coexist together. We have to find a way to live together. Maybe at the beginning we will not achieve love and peace and idealistic solution, but we should achieve acceptance and coexistence. We should confront the problems within. We should confront those crazy messianic things. We should confront the fundamentalists on all sides, as I said, and so on and so forth. So what we need to do with the international community and before that with ourselves is to be realistic and to be honest with ourselves and with the public and to tell them the truth. This is the truth. We are trying to do one, two, three, four. We need your support. We need your help. And as much as we need your help and support, we need also the help and support of important governments around the world.
Before we get into talking about a diminished Iran and what's happened with Hezbollah and other proxies of Iran, I want to get to audience questions. And viewers, please feel free to include your first name and your location with your question. Let's see, we have one here. Can the panelists address with greater detail, this comes from viewer Larry, the land swaps proposed to retain West Bank settlements and transfer current Israeli lands to the Palestinian state? Mr. Olmert, do you want to get into a bit more detail?
I can comment it very easier than most people think. In the 4.4% of the territory of the West Bank, which we agreed that will become part of the State of Israel by agreement, and that the equal-sized territory that was part of the State of Israel prior to 1967 will be swapped to become part of the Palestinian state. So, number one, the size of Palestinian state will be identical to what it was up until 1967, okay, which is what we say the Palestinian state on the basis of the 1967 borders. Now, in the 4.4% that will be then integrated into the State of Israel, already today, 82% of all the Jews that live across the former Green Line, both in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, live in the 4.4%. So when we talk about a possible relocation as one of the options, we talk about only 18% of all the Jews that live in those territories. Now, we didn't conclude this. We left it for negotiations. But one of the options is for relocation, and the relocation can take place in the 4.4%, so that all of the 100% of the Jews that live today in the territories continue to live in the territories, but not in where they are living today. But one of the alternatives, which will have to be negotiated, is that these people will continue to live where they live now, in the same settlements and in the same townships, but they will live in a Palestinian state, the 18%, and they will have to be subject to the Palestinian laws that will be part of Palestine. This is also an option. So I think that this is manageable. It's not impossible, as it was said time and again by people that want to say, we crossed the line of no return. This is done. There is not option for Palestinians. There is an option. There is. It's realistic. It's something that can be done. We need to fight for it in order to make it.
I just want to clarify, but you're not in your plan specifying where that Israeli land would go to a Palestinian state, where that's subject to negotiation, you're saying?
When I introduced my plan in 2008, I showed Dr. Abbas, the Palestinian president, a map, an accurate map, both of the territories which were to remain part of the state of Israel, integrated part of the state of Israel in the agreement, and the territories which will be swapped. It was presented, but this is something that is open for negotiations. Okay. I want to just remind one thing, which is very important. A Republican president, President Bush, whom I personally like very much, and we were very friendly, in a letter sent to Prime Minister Sharon on the 14th of April 2004, indicated that he thinks, America thinks, that in the context of a permanent agreement, Israel will be able to remain in 3 demographic centers in the West Bank, in the Etzion bloc, the surrounding Jerusalem, and in the north part of the West Bank. So the concept of remaining in some sections of the West Bank already was planted by President Bush in 2004.
All right. Briefly, Dr. Al-Kidwa, there would not be geographic contiguous nature between Gaza and the West Bank. And I mean, does that pose a long-term problem, or are there ways of setting up sort of safe corridors that would enable people to go to and from those 2 regions?
By the way, the letter that was referred to by Mr. Olmert also says that the United States is not going to recognize any change in the border without mutual agreement of the 2 sides. So,
of course,
there are important things here, and your question seems not to reflect what is written, what we agreed upon in the mutual recognition, because mutual recognition specifically speaks of a corridor linking Gaza and the West Bank. So there will be territorial contiguity.
And is it specified where that would be, or that too subject to negotiation?
Yeah, by the way, I proposed it in the 2008 as well. I talked with Mahmoud Abbas about a highway that will go from Gaza to the West Bank.
One thing I want to make it clear. So there are points that we did not specify, not because they are not solvable, but because of the fact that we left it to those who are in power, or hopefully when we are back in power. So, because there are rules in government, and one of the rules that there are aspects of a problem of a conflict that needs to be negotiated by the people who are in power. So we left these things, although we are convinced that they can be solved, and I think we have also specific ideas about how to solve them in rather not that difficult way. Let me put
Great. I'd like to get as many of our viewer questions in as possible. Kay and other viewers ask, is part of this a recognition, an acknowledgement by Palestinians and their representative that Israel has a right to exist. The rhetoric among the pro-Palestinian protesters in the U.S. seems to deny Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Dr.
Yes,
Kidwa?
yes. I mean, these things happen, and there are the slogan, the famous slogan, from the river to the sea, which is, I think, the 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 other face of the messianic vision by some Jewish organizations who say it's all ours and we need to annex the territory. And this is precisely what we object to. We say that we want coexistence, we want acceptance, we want the solution to take the form of two states, Israel and Palestine, on 1967 borders with an agreed upon swap. So yes, there are people on both sides who are crazy, and the main thing here, it should reflect acceptance and commitment to coexistence between the two states. If the Israeli decide that we are 1, 2, 3, it's them their business to decide, and we have to be committed to the existence with whatever they decide.
Let me ask about the right of return, because there apparently has been a significant debate in our Q&A section over this. So, Prime Minister Olmert, I want to ask you about this. Some viewers believe that there is no such thing. There is no legal right to return. So, Prime Minister Olmert, can you respond to that?
Can I take this, Mr. Olmert, because it has to do with the Palestinian position, basically.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dr. Kidwa.
let me
Dr.
take this.
Kidwa, yeah.
I will
Listen.
reserve the right
To continue and to make comments.
Yes, we'll come back to you. But Dr. Kidwa, feel free to go first.
Listen,
Yes.
first of all, I hope that we don't say that the right to return does not exist, because it does exist on the Israeli side. So there is no room for this kind of argument. Nevertheless, there are 2 points here. One, we didn't deal with this matter, again, not because we think it's not solvable, but because of the reason I explained earlier. And the second point, I think, in general, my personal position that the rights of the Palestinian refugees should be respected and should be dealt with seriously. Now, I don't think, as a politician, as someone who is seeking a solution with the Israeli side, I don't think that this will include an influx of Palestinians going back to their places prior to 1948. That is not realistic. That is not, I think, something that's going to happen. So you have two sides of this. You need to deal with the whole situation in a serious manner, with respect and with the importance that this issue deserves, while understanding also that there are requirements that need to be fulfilled, and that we are not going to see that influx of people coming back to where they were coming from.
So could it be financial compensation for that
Yeah,
right
there
to
are
return in
there are
lieu
many
of a physical
ideas.
return?
There are
I
many
just want
ideas
to
in this regard.
I want to add,
Yes, Mr. Olmert.
not in argument with Dr. Kidwa, that in the negotiations that I held with with Mahmoud Abbas, we discussed the issue of a certain number of Palestinians returning to the state of Israel back is not practical, because none of those who were left Israel in 1948 are still alive. So they may be offsprings, they may be family members, but we discussed this, and I say that Israel will agree to have, on the humanitarian basis, to have Palestinians coming to the state of Israel with numbers that will have to be agreed. And what we do in our proposal is we refer to this issue to be negotiated further by the leadership, but within the Arab League Peace Initiative, which talks about how Palestinians will be admitted back into the state of Israel. So in principle, this is something that can be negotiated. And I will repeat what Dr. Abbas said to me, and I think that I must say that Dr. Kidwa says the same in a very powerful manner, which has to be carefully listened to by Israelis. He says he knows and he understands that there is not going to be an influx of Palestinians. So everyone that will come back, and what we will have to do, we will have to create an international fund that will compensate all of the people that were uprooted from where they lived as a result of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, both Palestinians and Jews, because Jews were also uprooted from some Arab and Muslim countries as a result of this. It will have to be negotiated, will have to be examined, will have to be carefully managed, and we will appeal to the international community to help us finance this process, which I think is the practical solution to the major part of this problem.
Dr. Al-Kidwa, are you concerned that looking at the diminished state of Iran and Iran's proxies that have been so hammered by Israeli forces and other economic forces that are hitting the region, that the Israeli government and even the Trump administration here in the U.S. might see this as a ripe time to come down hard on Iran and to not recognize Palestinian statehood, that this would be an opportunity to actually make Palestinians more subjugated to Israeli control in the region? Are you concerned about that?
I don't see it this way. Let me first say that I understand that Israel has some specific problems with Iran for reasons that I can see and I can understand. But I also want to say very clearly that I don't think that Iran has that much influence on the Palestinian side, in spite of the fact that an organization like Hamas was supported and financed by Iran. But you can't compare Iran influence in Palestine or with among the Palestinians with Iran's influence in Lebanon, Iraq, or in any of these places. So it is limited kind of influence and ability to decide things. And we would like to keep it this way and to enjoy our independent ability to decide our things without any foreign interference, and definitely that includes Iran as well.
And Prime Minister Olmert, your thoughts about what we're seeing with Iran's lack of authority, how does that change the equation?
Look, I am much more concerned about the enemy from within than the enemy from the outside. Iran is an enemy. I think it's been slightly weakened. I suggest that none of us will lose proportion about Iran. Iran is a major power, 80 million people and more, with historic tradition and legacies and strengths and wealth. And Israel is not going to destroy Iran, as some people suggest. And Iran has not been weakened to that degree. It's true that Iran has suffered some setbacks as a result of the defeat of Hezbollah, which was anticipated. We all knew that Hezbollah will be defeated, as it was defeated in 2006. In the war that I was in charge of. For 17 years, they didn't dare shoot one bullet from across the border in Lebanon to the state of Israel. So it's good that the proxies of Iran were defeated and weakened, and certainly it is good that Bashar al-Assad was removed from power. But I'm not certain that I know who will control Syria. I suggest that we will not lose any proportion about the options that it opens for any aggressive Israeli policy. We should stay where we are and try to ensure the defense of the state of Israel. And I think that Iran, if Iran will draw the necessary lessons from the events that took place, maybe it will become milder and more restrained than it was, which will certainly contribute to stability in our part of the world.
There are so many great viewer questions, and I'm sorry we're almost out of time, but I want to give each of you gentlemen an opportunity for a very brief close in the last couple of minutes that we have here. Dr. Al-Kidwa, just if you take no more than 60
I want
seconds.
to be the one that speaks first, and I want Dr. Al-Kidwa to make the conclusion, okay?
Okay, that's fine,
I
absolutely.
want to say this. Dr. Al-Kidwa is a very seasoned political person. I'm also. We've spent all our life in doing politics. We are not naives. We know what we are doing. To those who think that we are completely at a distance from any chance of achieving what we say, I say, follow us, support us, help us, it will become a reality.
Dr. Al-Kidwa.
Okay, let me say this. As a matter of fact, we didn't know each other from before. We know of each other, of course. I heard of that a lot. I knew exactly what he was all about. And as he said, he is not naive. I mean, actually, he is. I think once I said in our conference, I think that he is a warrior. As much as I am a warrior, but I am a political warrior. He might be warrior, you know. but that gives more credence and more credibility to what we say and what we try to do, and not lessen that. The fact that we are serious guys and actually we want to achieve and to help and to support the national interests of our respective people. It's not like dreaming about something, but it's a way how to help our people and how to support and help even more the national interest of our people. And that's what we are trying to do. And as we said repeatedly, what we are suggesting is doable, and not only doable, but it's the only way forward if we are to get rid of this nightmare and of continued war.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us and
Thank
talking
you.
with our viewers in Southern California, but throughout the United States and throughout the English-speaking world. We thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good week, all of
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank our
And my
viewers for
apology
joining
again.
us
Yeah, thank
on this Sunday morning on the West Coast and early afternoon on the East Coast. Thank you so much for being with us. And we ask during this year-end holiday period for you to please consider a tax-deductible contribution as we near the end of 2024 for these free programs that are provided by Jews United for Democracy and Justice. You can go to the website to make your contribution. The web address is JewsUnitedForDemocracy.org. JewsUnitedForDemocracy.org, and you can make your tax-deductible contribution. Thank you very, very much. Now, our final America at a Crossroads program for 2024 is this coming Wednesday. New York Times opinion columnist Nicholas Kristof, a wonderful speaker, always a terrific guest on this series, will talk about finding hope in stressful times. He'll be in conversation with the terrific Warren Olney, and what a perfect accompaniment as we head into the holiday season of Hanukkah and Christmas, of course, at the end of the year, and New Year's Day arriving soon after. It's a wonderful topic on which to shift from 2024 to 2025. Thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to joining you for an America at a Crossroads in early 2025. From all of us, very happy holidays and a happy new year.